I found out my wife was sleeping with her therapist, and it was my brother in disguise. Let me back up, because that sentence doesn't land the way it should without a little context. My name's Daniel. I'm 34, an IT consultant, the guy who fixes problems. I build systems, untangle knots in code, restore order from chaos. I always thought that same skill set applied to life, that if something broke, you could patch it, reboot it, solve it. But when my wife Alyssa began to fall apart in slow motion, no patch or fix could hold her together. We had been married for 6 years. Most of those years were good, real good. She was sunshine in a person, the kind of woman who left notes in my lunch, danced while cooking, laughed so hard at bad jokes that I told them on purpose. She was beautiful too, but not in the way people think. It was something in her eyes, alive, warm, electric. Then came the shift, a subtle, creeping fog that settled over her and wouldn't lift. It started with sleepless nights. She'd toss and turn, muttering under her breath. Some mornings I'd wake up and find her already dressed, sitting silently on the couch, staring at nothing. I'd ask what was wrong and she'd say, "I don't know, I just feel like I'm drowning." At first, I thought it was just burnout. Her job as a pediatric nurse had been getting more intense. She'd always cared too much, carried every child's pain home with her. But soon the cracks grew deeper. She cried often, sometimes in the shower, sometimes while folding laundry. She flinched at sudden noises. She couldn't look me in the eye during dinner. I offered everything I could. Walks, breaks, a weekend away. She nodded, thanked me, tried, but nothing helped. And I started to worry. "You need someone to talk to," I told her one night after she collapsed onto the kitchen floor sobbing into a dish towel. "Not just me. A real professional." "I don't want to talk to a stranger," she whispered. "What if they think I'm broken?" "They won't," I said gently. "And even if you are, that's okay. I'll help you fix it." She hesitated, but then she agreed. That night I researched therapists like it was a government operation. I wanted someone with credentials, 5-star reviews, and a warm, approachable face. I found Dr. Paul Reeves. Glowing testimonials, gentle smile in his photo, private practice out of a quiet suburban suite. He offered trauma-focused therapy, mindfulness integration, EMDR, and all the acronyms people online said were helpful. More importantly, the reviews were glowing. Dr. Reeves saved my life. Best therapist I've ever had. Kind, patient, insightful. It felt right. I showed her the site. She scrolled through slowly, eyes unreadable. Then she nodded. "I'll give him a try." I booked her first appointment. The place was about 20 minutes away. A quiet little 2-story building tucked behind a strip mall, next to a yoga studio and a vegan cafe. The suite was upstairs, apartment style, with no signage except a small brass plate by the door. Private counseling, by appointment only. "I like that it doesn't scream, 'therapy office,'" she said the first time we pulled into the parking lot. "Feels more private." I waited in the car while she went in. 45 minutes later, she came back out, eyes a little softer, posture a little straighter. We did that twice a week. Mondays and Thursdays. I always waited in the car, sipping gas station coffee, answering emails, pretending I wasn't worried sick. "How was it?" I'd ask. "Good," she'd say. Or "it helped," or sometimes just a shrug, but a calm one. One day, after about 3 weeks, she reached over and squeezed my hand when she got back in the car. "Thank you," she said. That alone made it all worth it. I told myself we were turning a corner, that the storm was passing. But I should have known. Storms don't just vanish. They hide before they hit harder. At first, therapy seemed to work. Alyssa wasn't exactly her old self again, but the fog lifted just enough for me to breathe easier. She smiled more, laughed once or twice. She even cooked her famous lemon chicken again, something she hadn't done in months. I thought we were making progress. But then came the shift. Subtle at first, like wind changing direction. It began with small things. A pause before answering. a glance that lingered on her phone a little too long, that faraway look in her eyes while stirring her coffee in the morning. Then she started avoiding me, not just emotionally, physically too. She'd come home from sessions and disappear into the bedroom, saying she was tired. She stopped cuddling up on the couch during movie nights. Our sex life, once warm and spontaneous, evaporated into awkward silences, and maybe tomorrow. I tried to be patient. I knew trauma could affect intimacy. I'd read enough articles to understand that sometimes people needed space, so I gave it to her. Until space became a wall. I remember one morning, it was a Tuesday. We were sitting at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee between us, scrambled eggs on mismatched plates, sunlight pouring in through the blinds. It should have been peaceful, domestic, but it felt like 2 strangers trying to pretend they weren't. She stared at her phone the whole time. I asked her how she slept. She mumbled something like fine. I asked if she had work later. She nodded but didn't look up. You okay? I asked gently. Yeah, she said too quickly. Just tired. Always tired. She left without saying goodbye. That night I heard her crying in the bathroom. The soft, muffled kind that people do when they don't want to be heard. I lay there in bed, pretending to sleep, heart breaking with every sniffle. The next morning she scheduled an emergency session at 9:30 p.m. I blinked at her. Isn't that late? She shrugged. Dr. Reeves said he was willing to make time. I need it. And what could I say to that? No, don't heal? Of course not. So I nodded and offered to drive her, like always. She hesitated for the first time. Actually, I think I'll take an Uber. You should get some rest. That was new, but I didn't push. Maybe she didn't want to inconvenience me. Maybe it was part of her taking control. But the knot in my gut tightened. 2 nights later, same thing. Another late-night emergency. Another Uber. She stopped letting me pick her up altogether. Then one Thursday, I noticed something strange. She came out of the bedroom dressed for therapy, but not like usual. She was wearing a soft blue dress I hadn't seen in a while, the one that hugged her waist and made her eyes pop. Her hair was curled, not in that messy I don't care bun, but styled. And her lips. She was wearing gloss. You look nice, I said, trying to hide the confusion in my voice. She froze for a second, then smiled, a little too quickly. I just wanted to feel good about myself today. You know, for me. Of course, I replied. And maybe that was true. Maybe she did just want to feel human again. After everything, she deserved that. But something about it didn't sit right. She hadn't worn makeup in weeks, months, and never for therapy. Therapy was messy, raw. Who dressed up for crying? Still, I let it go. That weekend, she was distant again. We watched a movie together, but she spent most of it scrolling on her phone. She said she wasn't hungry when I made dinner. She said she was exhausted when I reached for her in bed. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I'd gone wrong. The truth was, I missed her. I missed us. The way she used to snort when she laughed. The way she used to reach for my hand under the table when we ate out. The way she'd whisper, "I'm glad you're mine," when she thought I was asleep. Now she barely looked at me. And yet, I kept showing up, driving her when she let me, waiting in the car like some quiet chauffeur of emotional healing, pretending the silence between us wasn't deafening. In that car, parked outside a building I'd never stepped into, I felt more like a support beam than a husband. Silent, strong, ignored. And the thing about support beams, they carry the weight, until they break. I hadn't seen Josh in over 5 years, not since he stole my girlfriend and left town without a goodbye, without an apology, without even a text. So when I saw him sitting alone at the cafe across from my office, sipping coffee like he belonged in my world again, my stomach twisted into knots. At first, I thought I was imagining things. He looked different, cleaner. His hair was shorter, his beard trimmed. He wore a blazer of all things. Josh, who once lived in a hoodie and called deodorant optional. He saw me through the window and waved. Big smile. like nothing ever happened. I froze. My first instinct was to walk the other way, pretend I hadn't noticed. But I'd never been good at avoidance, not like he was. So I stepped inside, each foot heavier than the last. "Danny," he said, standing up. "You look older." "Thanks," I muttered. "So do you." We stood there awkwardly for a second before he gestured to the seat across from him. "I figured it was time," he said once I sat down. "Time to stop pretending we're not brothers." I didn't answer. I just stared at him, studied the lines on his face, the way his eyes darted slightly when he talked. Still not great at holding a gaze. "I know what I did was messed up," he continued. "What I did to you. With Emily. I was selfish. I was lost." "You were a liar," I corrected. "And a thief." He nodded, to his credit. "I was. But I'm not that guy anymore." I almost laughed. "So what, you just woke up one day and decided to become a decent human?" "No," he said calmly. "It took time. Pain. I did a lot of reading, therapy, self-reflection. I realized how many people I'd hurt, especially you." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "So why now?" He looked down. "Because I miss having a brother. And because I heard about Alyssa. Through Mom. About the anxiety, the panic attacks. I thought maybe, if you needed support." I cut him off. "She's getting help." "I'm glad," he said, and his voice sounded sincere. "She seems like a good person. You're lucky." I didn't know what to say to that. Eventually, I left without promising anything. Just a vague, "We'll see." That night, I told Alyssa. I expected her to roll her eyes or say, "Screw that guy." After all, she knew what he'd done. But instead, she surprised me. "Maybe he's changed," she said gently. "People do. Especially after they hit rock bottom." I frowned. "He was rock bottom." She smiled faintly. "Still, he's your brother." I stared at her. "You really think I should forgive him?" "I think holding on to that kind of resentment eats you alive," she said. "Besides, isn't family worth something? Coming from anyone else, I would have brushed it off." But Alyssa, the woman who hadn't truly smiled in weeks, was suddenly defending the guy who'd betrayed me? That made me pause. And maybe I was just so desperate for connection, any connection, that I said, "Okay." A few days later, I invited Josh over for dinner. He showed up with a bottle of red wine, a confident smile, and a charm that felt both familiar and foreign. Alyssa greeted him at the door, and I swear there was a flicker in her eyes, some flash of recognition, but it passed too fast to read. Dinner was fine. The three of us sat around the table eating spaghetti and talking about everything and nothing. Josh told some stories from the city he'd been living in. Vague mentions of odd jobs, volunteering, trying to find himself. Alyssa laughed more that night than she had in a month, and I told myself that was a good thing. But little things stuck in my mind, like how she got up halfway through dessert and stayed gone for 10 minutes, said she had a headache, or how she refilled Josh's wine glass before mine, or the way they never quite looked at each other when they talked, like they were deliberately trying not to. I chalked it up to my own paranoia, my trust issues, old wounds reopening. But the weirdness didn't stop there. Josh started coming over more often, always just passing through or in the neighborhood. Sometimes he'd show up with takeout. Once he brought Alyssa a book, something about mindfulness and emotional resilience. "Thought it might help," he said casually. She smiled, touched the cover like it was made of gold. One Friday I came home from work early and found a note on the kitchen counter, went for a walk, back in an hour. Nothing unusual. Except Josh texted me 20 minutes later, "Great seeing Alyssa at the park earlier. Hope we can all hang again soon." The math didn't add up. Another time I mentioned to Alyssa that Josh had said something funny the night before, and she answered too quickly, "Oh, I didn't know he was over." Except I never said where I had seen him. I started to get this gnawing feeling in my gut. Not a full-blown suspicion, not yet. Just a whisper. A sense that something was off. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband, the jealous sibling. I didn't want to accuse anyone of anything I couldn't prove, so I kept quiet, but I started watching, and waiting, and wondering how the hell the same brother who once stole my girlfriend was now sitting on my couch, sipping my wine, laughing with my wife, and why, after all these years, it suddenly felt like I was the outsider in my own home. It was just another quiet Sunday morning. I was out back pulling weeds from the edge of the fence when Karen, our neighbor from 2 doors down, leaned over from her garden. She always wore a wide straw hat, even when there wasn't much sun, and had a way of turning every small talk into a 3-act play. But that day, she said something that made my blood freeze. "Hey Daniel," she called over, holding a pair of shears. "That fellow you've been bringing by, the therapist guy. He was here again yesterday, right?" I looked up, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Dr. Reeves?" She nodded. "Yes, him. I saw him coming out of your driveway again. You know," she added, squinting a little, "he looks familiar. The face is hard to see sometimes. He always has that cap pulled down and those big glasses. Almost like he's trying not to be seen. But something about his walk, or maybe the jawline. I don't know. He reminds me of someone." I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Probably just coincidence." She tilted her head. "Maybe. Or maybe he just reminds me of your brother. Josh, right?" I stared at her. Everything in me paused, like someone had yanked the emergency brake on my thoughts. "Josh?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice neutral. She nodded. "Yeah, it's silly, probably. I haven't seen Josh in years. But the therapist has that same lanky frame and kind of theatrical way of moving. Strange, huh?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, strange. But inside, something cracked. That night, I waited until Alyssa was asleep before slipping out of bed and grabbing my laptop. I searched Dr. Paul Reeves, licensed therapist. No website. No Psychology Today profile. No licensing board record. No LinkedIn. No footprint at all, which was impossible for a guy with 5-star reviews and a full schedule. I tried the name of the building where he supposedly practiced, just a bland directory listing with no therapist mentioned. My hands started to sweat. I clicked deeper, scrolled through forums, databases, anything I could find. Still nothing. I even checked the reverse image search on the blurry profile picture from the review site I'd originally found. It turned up stock image results. Not a real person. A placeholder. My heart thudded in my chest. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. The next day at breakfast, I tried to bring it up gently. "Alyssa," I said, sliding eggs onto her plate, "has your therapist ever, I don't know, shown you credentials? Like a license or degree?" She blinked at me. "What?" "I was just curious," I said quickly. "I couldn't find anything about him online. No reviews anymore. Nothing official. That's kind of odd, right?" She set her fork down a little too hard. "Why are you Googling my therapist?" "I wasn't spying," I lied. "It's just..." Karen said something weird. She thought she recognized him. Alyssa's entire posture changed. She stiffened. Her eyes narrowed. "She what?" She thought he looked a little like Josh. Silence. Then she laughed, sharp and dry. "Okay, now you're just being ridiculous," she snapped. "First Karen's gossiping, now you're playing detective?" "I'm not accusing anyone," I said. "I just..." "Just what?" Her voice rose. "You don't trust me now? You think I can't make my own decisions?" "No, that's not it at all," I said. "I'm just worried. You've been different lately, secretive. You're crying more at night." "Oh, so now you notice," she cut in bitterly. "You didn't notice when I was drowning in panic, when I couldn't breathe. But now that I'm finally trying to get better, you want to control it." "I don't want to control you," I said, standing. "I want to protect you." "From who?" she demanded. "Josh?" "That's insane, Daniel." "Then let me come with you. Just once. I want to meet him face to face." Her eyes flashed. "Why not?" "Because I'm a grown woman," she said coldly. "And I don't need a babysitter. I need space. That's what therapy is. A space that's mine. You don't get to invade that." And with that, she grabbed her coat and stormed out of the bedroom, leaving me standing there with my mouth open and my heart thudding in my chest. She was right about one thing. I had ignored the warning signs at the beginning, but now they were screaming at me. And for the first time, I was starting to wonder, had I handed my wife over to someone I never should have trusted? I hadn't planned to follow her. It just happened. That Tuesday night, she said she had a last-minute emergency session. Her tone was clipped, her eyes didn't meet mine, and her lipstick was a darker shade than usual. I told her to drive safe. She nodded, grabbed her coat, and left without a kiss. I waited exactly 5 minutes before getting in my car and pulling out behind her. I stayed back a few car lengths, my lights off when I could. She drove like someone with a destination etched deep into muscle memory. No hesitation, no GPS. I tailed her across town until she turned into that familiar gravel lot behind the old duplex, the therapy office. I parked a block away and killed the engine. From where I sat, I could barely make out the doorway. She walked up like she belonged there, no glance over her shoulder, no caution. She rang the buzzer, waited, and the door clicked open, no one visible. My pulse pounded. I waited in the dark car for almost an hour. Every 5 minutes I had to fight the urge to charge in and demand answers. But I waited, chewing my lip until I tasted blood. And when the lights inside dimmed, not off, just dimmed like someone was setting a mood, I made my move. I crept up the steps, hood up, gloves on. There were no cameras. Of course there weren't. This place wasn't about security. It was about secrecy. The lock was cheap. One solid push with my shoulder and a twist of the flathead screwdriver in the latch, and the door gave way with a quiet click. Inside, the air was thick with a smell that wasn't quite incense. Something sweeter, muskier. Candles burned on low wooden shelves. A bottle of wine sat uncorked beside 2 glasses on a coffee table, and that's when I realized this wasn't an office. It was a set. Like someone had Googled therapist aesthetic and recreated it in an Airbnb. A bookshelf full of unopened self-help paperbacks. A journal laid neatly on the arm of a chair. A white noise machine humming in the corner. But behind the curtain that separated the office from the back room, the illusion shattered. There was no desk, no files, no degrees on the walls. Instead, a bed, unmade, sheets tangled, pillows still warm, and on the dresser, a wig, black-rimmed glasses, a knit beanie, next to them a hoodie I recognized immediately. It used to belong to me, until Josh stole it years ago. My heart dropped into my stomach. I scanned the room in disbelief. There were more clues, now screamingly obvious, his cologne still lingering in the air. His boots kicked off lazily by the closet. His watch, the one he always said made him look credible, on the nightstand. And then, the photos. They were tucked inside a drawer, but not well. Maybe he thought no one would look. Alyssa and Josh, together, laughing, her hand on his chest. His mouth pressed to her neck. In one, she wore that same wine-colored lipstick. They weren't patient and therapist. They were lovers, and worse, conspirators. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the betrayal crashing over me like a wave so strong I almost retched. Josh, my brother, the one who'd disappeared after screwing my last girlfriend, the one who swore he'd changed, who said he'd grown, matured, read philosophy, who wormed his way back into my life with apology and charm. He hadn't changed at all. He'd just leveled up his lies. And Alyssa, was she tricked, or did she know? Had she fallen for his act, seduced by some carefully crafted emotional connection? Or had she played along from the start, let me arrange the therapy, watched me drive her twice a week, and then walked right into my brother's arms like it was all just one long joke? I stood up, the air thick and suffocating. I staggered out of the back room and back into the fake office, grabbing the edge of the bookshelf to steady myself. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. This was worse than cheating. This was a con, a coordinated manipulation by the 2 people I loved most. I made it back to the car on autopilot. Once inside, I locked the doors and gripped the steering wheel like I might tear it off. My chest heaved. I couldn't get a full breath. I punched the dashboard once, twice, then stopped, shaking, sweating. I thought of every night I'd waited outside, trying to be supportive. Every morning she'd said, "I feel lighter. I think he's helping." Every time I doubted myself, blamed myself for her distance, her sadness, her closed-off moods. It had all been a lie. Or maybe just not about me. The sun started to rise behind the cracked windshield, casting everything in a sick orange glow. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if I'd confront her, or him, or both. But one thing was certain. I knew the truth now. And there was no going back. I told Alyssa I was heading out of town for the weekend. A client emergency, I said, something that couldn't wait. She didn't question it. She barely looked up from her phone. I packed a bag, tossed it in the trunk, and drove to a nearby motel 2 towns over. Not far, just enough distance to make the lie believable. Then I waited. At 8:42 p.m. the house lights turned on. At 9:06 another car pulled into the driveway. His car. I should have felt something. Rage. Grief. Vindication. But there was nothing. Just a cold, hollow kind of clarity. Around midnight I drove back. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke open. Rain lashed the windshield. Thunder cracked overhead like the sky itself had finally run out of patience. I parked a few houses down and walked the rest of the way, soaked in seconds. My key slid into the lock without a sound. The house was warm, too warm, like the heat had been turned up high to chase away guilt. The living room lights were dim. Music played low from her Bluetooth speaker, a moody jazz album she only put on when she wanted to feel sophisticated. Their shoes were by the door. His jacket, my old jacket, hung on the coat hook like it belonged. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. Laughter, a soft murmur, the rustle of sheets upstairs. I didn't go up. I sat on the living room couch, my couch, and waited. Eventually, footsteps creaked on the stairs. They must have heard something. A door opened. Then Alyssa's voice, startled. "Daniel?" She appeared at the top of the stairs in one of his t-shirts. Her face went pale. Behind her, Josh stepped out, shirtless, hair messy. His expression confused for half a second, until he saw me. Then it shifted, not to guilt, but to defense. "You weren't supposed to be back till Sunday," he said, like that was the issue. Alyssa clutched the railing. "Daniel, I can explain." I didn't move. I just looked at them, like strangers, and in that moment they were. Josh came down the stairs first. "You never understood her," he snapped. "Not really. You were always so busy trying to fix everything that you never listened." Alyssa followed, tears already in her eyes. "It wasn't planned, Daniel. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Really?" My voice was calm. Too calm. "Was that before or after you helped him fake an entire therapy relationship?" They both flinched. Josh tried again, louder now. "You were distant, man. Cold. You think being a provider makes you a good husband?" "Don't," I said, standing slowly. "Don't spin this into some self-righteous garbage." Alyssa stepped closer. "He heard me, Daniel. He saw how unhappy I was." I looked at her. "You could have talked to me." "I tried," she said, voice cracking. "But you didn't see it. You just kept pushing me to therapy. You didn't want to deal with me." I nodded slowly. "So instead of dealing with me, you slept with my brother. And let me drive you to him twice a week." Her tears came harder now. "I didn't know how to stop." "You never intended to stop," I said. "You just thought I'd never find out." Josh stepped forward. "She deserves better than a man who buries himself in work and thinks that counts as love." It wasn't even his words that cut. It was the way he said them, like he believed them, like he thought he was doing something noble. I laughed. Once, a sharp, empty sound. Then I walked to the front door and opened it. "Both of you, out." Alyssa blinked. "Daniel." No yelling, no screaming. "Just leave." Rain poured down outside like the sky was trying to drown the whole damn street. Thunder cracked again. The wind howled through the open doorway. Josh looked like he was about to argue. Of course he was, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He grabbed his jacket in silence. Alyssa hesitated. Her eyes searched mine, as if there might still be something left between us. Can we at least talk? I shut the door gently in her face. No slam, just finality. I stood there, forehead against the wood, hands clenched at my sides. Outside, I heard her sob. I didn't open it again. They stood on the porch for a minute or two, muffled voices through the storm. Then footsteps, fading, gone. The house was quiet now, except for the steady ticking of the clock and the distant roll of thunder. I stood in the middle of the living room, the place where everything we'd built had just collapsed. I thought I'd feel shattered, but I didn't. I just felt clean, like the worst part was over, like the rot had finally been scraped out of the wound. 2 months had passed since that stormy night, since I shut the door on Alyssa and Josh, and with it, on the life I thought I knew. I moved out of our suburban house, leaving behind the memories and the ghosts that clung to every corner. My new place was a loft downtown, stripped down, minimalist. No clutter, no distractions, just clean lines, bright light flooding through large windows, and silence that wasn't heavy but somehow comforting. I spent my first few weeks unpacking boxes, setting up a small desk, and finding a therapist I could trust, a real one. Not someone pretending to help while hiding behind a mask. Therapy was hard, brutally honest, but necessary. I learned how to untangle the knots Alyssa and Josh had left in my mind, how to recognize manipulation when it disguised itself as love or concern. I started to understand the patterns, how toxic relationships trap you not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. One late night after a session that left me drained but oddly hopeful, I started writing. What began as a few notes on my phone turned into a blog, Clear Eyes, Clear Mind. I wrote about my experience, about manipulation and gaslighting, about the importance of self-worth and boundaries. I didn't expect much at first, but the response surprised me. Emails, messages from strangers who saw their own pain in my words, comments from people who finally felt understood, seen, and less alone. It gave me purpose, a way to turn my pain into something useful, maybe even healing. That morning, the sunlight poured in like a warm invitation. I sat in my favorite spot at the corner cafe, the one with the cracked leather chairs and the faint smell of roasted beans lingering in the air. My black coffee steamed gently beside a well-worn book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a reminder that even in suffering, there can be purpose. As I flipped a page, a soft voice interrupted my quiet. Mind if I sit here? I looked up to see a woman holding a small, fluffy dog. She smiled, genuine, unguarded. Please, I said, moving my bag to make room. She settled in, her dog curling up on the floor beside her. We exchanged polite small talk at first. Her name was Rachel. She lived nearby and came to this cafe every morning with her dog. Something in her calm presence felt easy, unforced. We talked about books, about life, about the strange ways people heal. I realized I hadn't smiled like this in a long time. It was quiet, simple, good. A gentle hope began to flicker. Maybe this was the start of something new, not a replacement for what I lost, but a different kind of beginning. Freedom tasted bitter and strong, like the black coffee in my hand. But it was real, and for the first time in months, I felt ready to savor it.